Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And in this video I'm going to take you through how I painted my Horus Heresy Death Guard Mark III Space Marines. See the finished articles here. Dirty, grimy colour scheme, because that's what the Death Guard do in the Horus Heresy. They don't repair themselves till kind of after the battle, don't repaint the armour. So that's the look I've gone for this whole army. There are other videos where I've talked about my Terminators, the Spartans, some other bits. And eventually I'll create a playlist where you can check out the whole army when it is kind of completed. So these have dragged on for a while. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know I started these quite a few weeks ago. Normally I get stuff painted faster than this, but I've had other projects kind of going on at the same time. And I did batch paint these as a batch of 20. And it sounds like first world problems, but I'm so used to painting with a painting handle, and I painted these without, that it just seemed to take me that a little bit longer. But they're done now, and I'm really happy with them. Now, I built the models straight after getting the Horus Heresy box set, before I could get hold of any shoulder pads. So you see there, I've got some 3D printed shoulder pads that I've taken some little blue stuff moulds of, just of the symbol, so I can actually get some symbology on all of these without using transfers, which again, currently aren't available. So, thin as possible, green stuff casts, cut them out really carefully with that kind of hobby knife and get them prepped for kind of going on the shoulders. So they are very thin cast, probably 1 millimetre or less. They do protrude a little bit, but you'll see when I paint them, that really does blend in. Just super glue to get them secured on the shoulder there. I was considering doing symbols for the tactical markings on the right shoulder. Ended up not doing and went a different way. I went for some transfers, which you'll see shortly. Now, when I put this particular marine together, I managed to slice off one of the spikes on that symbol. Not a problem if you make this kind of mistake when you're building, because I've just drilled a bullet hole in there, widened it out with a hobby knife, and then it represents that kind of battle damage. So whenever you're doing marines and figures and whatever, you know, battle damage, things that go wrong, you can always kind of cover that up either in the modelling stage here, where I'm just drilling the hole, or in the painting stage later. Now, undercoating, if you've watched my other videos with the Horus Heresy Death Guard, I've base coated in black and then just a silver, like a lead belcher colour. This time, I've gone for a Retributor Armour spray colour, because there's so much brass detailing on these models that I wanted to pick out. This will save an awful lot of time, and I'll do the silver areas sort of by hand, rather than if you've watched the other videos, I did it in, kind of in reverse. So the first stage is that Rakkar flesh. This is the off-white colour that the Death Guard have on the majority of their armour. Nice thin layers using a wet palette that you've seen there. Check out my video about wet palettes, about why you might want to use those on all the areas of the model. Now, I'm not being super detailed, super neat and tidy, because if you leave bits of that metal undercoat showing through on the panels, it looks like battle damage and grime and things. One of the beauty of this type of colour scheme. Going into the Death Guard green on both the shoulder pads, and I also pick out some areas on the banner bearer and those kind of things later. So just the pads with that green. Again, you could choose to pick out some helmet details, a knee pad, that kind of thing. I wanted to keep it quite simple. Now, bolter casings, because this army is kind of reflective of my 40k Nurgle army, I'm going for black bolter cases, because that's what I went there. I don't want to have this army super vibrant and colourful, so I want to keep it fairly muted. So just using that black on the bolter case, and also on the cables that are on the back of the obviously old school Mark III armour power packs that are on the back there. Eye slots, again, personal choice. I'm using yellow, because that's what I've done the rest of my Horus Heresy Death Guard, but also that's what my 40k Death Guard are. I think it's just a nice small popper colour to bring something different into the model without going too vibrant. Like I said before, I want to keep it fairly muted. Plasma for me, I tend to do it blue, so just whacking the blue into the plasma coils on the pistol there, and that really is a very sort of muted colour. Now, I'm using red on the sort of symbols you'll see later in terms of tactical symbols, but also onto the crest on the sergeants there. It's a fairly dark red, echoing that onto the banners. Now, the reason I've used the red is, again, tying it into a 40k Nurgle, but also I've ordered some transfers you'll see later, and I ordered them red coloured, so the red colour is going to reflect onto the transfer symbol that's going to go onto the shoulder in the end there. Now, the basing, I said I'm not going to do too much on the basing in this video because I've covered that in a previous one with the army, but I'm going for a fairly muted sort of irradiated wasteland kind of desert base, so just a nice dark brown onto the base in there. And I did it at that stage because I was kind of working through the army. I wanted to get the bases done because that can take a while to dry, because you put in a kind of a slightly more watery layer on, and it's all about really timing it in there. So then I went into painting the silver on the models, and again picking out the bolter barrels, some of the magazines. Didn't go into doing the gaps in the armour or anything like that. I kept that fairly simple, just really onto the bolter. Now it's transfer stage. I forgot to video the actual unopening transfers, but these are Mighty Brush transfers. I ordered some tactical symbols, One option was to cast them up, but I didn't do that really. Now I'm not going to go into huge detail about how to put the transfers on. I've got another video covering that I did a while ago, how to make transfers look really cool, so I'll drop that link down below. But I am using the kind of Vallejo transfer system. So stage 1, gloss varnish on the pad, it makes the transfers stick better. Stage 2 is paste on some decal fix before you put the transfer on, so I didn't show that on the camera there. And then once the transfer is kind of set for a few hours or whatever, you put that decal softener on there, and that kind of melts it around the shoulder pad. So that kind of transfer system, that's a super quick talk through about how to do it. But the video down below does link and goes into real detail about how to make transfers look really cool on models and make it look like you've kind of painted them on. Now this is the Vallejo dirty ink wash stage. I use this all the time on a lot of projects. Any sort of dirty sepia toned wash will do, but cover the models, good coverage of everything including the base, and that really dirties down the Marines. Quite often in other videos you'll hear me say you could leave it at this point. I don't think you can with the Death Guard because it makes the white too dirty. So it's going back over the layers. Now I'm putting a sped up section here to show you how long I spend covering up this next white layer. So the paint is off a wet palette. If you don't use a wet palette, just make sure the paint is quite watered down, and you put in very thin layers onto the armour. You kind of almost glazing, but a little bit thicker. I'm going to have to do a painting technique video about what I mean by almost glazing. So it's a little bit thicker than that, and you're putting it on very light layers, going over, making sure you don't go into the cracks of the armour because you want to keep all that shade into the cracks. And if you're painting around the rivets and things on there, for example, you're leaving that shade in all those areas. And then even you can see almost through the white paint into the shade layer underneath, so it looks grimy, dirty armour. So it's one of them techniques. I quite enjoy it. And then it's on to the same technique with the next layers. So you're revisiting the colours you've already used. You can see here I'm painting onto the transfer with that Death Guard green. So now you revisit all the kind of sections you've done before. The idea being is you'll use the same colour that you've already painted with, but you'll put it in the very, very raised areas of here, the crest or the armour panels or whatever, and it gives almost 3 or 4 tones onto the model. And I'm trying to keep it so that I don't go too clean with this because, again, that dirty Death Guard effect. Now the black, you could have almost got away with putting no extra layer on because the wash reacts differently onto the black paint, but I'm just putting some little areas of black and then it's on to finishing the base. And again, I won't go through all the details, but this is now dry brushing, so you can see here how very little paint is going on to that base. That's why I'm showing you a few seconds of it. So very, very gently, very, very lightly, started off with the brown, brushed up, and then it's onto like a bleach bone colour to brush up. You can see the amount of time that you spend doing this dry brushing layer. Finishing off the edge of the base with black, I think it just blends in with what we've done before. And again, I've done all these stages in this order because really I wanted it kind of ready before I did the final quite laborious stage, which we're going to talk about here. Now, as I've been painting it, I have tried to avoid all the rivets and bolts and things on the model because then it highlights that kind of brass stage. Fortunately, you do end up catching and covering a lot of these rivets and things, so I'm just going around and picking a few of them out to just bring life back to it. Now if you notice on the finished models, I don't pick all the rivets out on the knuckles and the backpack and whatever, but I think they're very, very prominent on, you know, the greaves and the knee pads, so I pick them out on the areas it's going to be super visible. On the kind of sergeants and the banner bearers, I picked out a few more, so I didn't go to the nth degree collecting everything. Now I completely forgot to record again, so this is just showing you I've got the grass tufts. I've used a knife to slice them up into smaller sections. Tweezers, bit of PVA glue, stick them onto the bases there for that burnt sort of grass effect that we're going for with the Death Guard here. And I've put a couple of tufts on some bases, a bit more on others. So that's it. Quick layer of spray varnish on top of them. And then these are the finished Marines you can see here. Nice, for me, dirty, grimy effect. You could go another extra stage by doing some sort of oxidization paste and technique onto the brass areas. Didn't do it with the basic Marines. I wanted them to not be quite as detailed as the Terminators I've done, but if you want to see what I mean, check out the Terminator video that I've done for here. And there's a couple of extra stages I did on those just to lift them up because they're an elite unit. These are obviously that Troops choice. So hope you liked that. I enjoyed doing these. The army's getting closer and closer to completion. So look, like, comment, subscribe, check out my Instagram and Facebook, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in another video.